Hi, welcome to episode 4 of Live with the Librarians. We're here at Point Cook Library this evening, and I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're recording tonight's episode, the people of the Kulin Nations, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. My name is Anita, and I'm joined this evening by some of our librarians. I have Anu, Jess and Lachlan, and we're here to talk about some of our reads, our summer reads, and hopefully hear from you as well, where I'm keen to get your recommendations. What are you currently reading? What are you looking forward to reading? And if you have any questions for our panelists, post a comment and we'll get to them later on. So I'm interested to hear, Anu, what are you currently reading?
Well, the book that I'm reading currently is Anne Enright's The Green Road. So she's a very famous author. She has won the Man Booker Prize for one of her novels. And this one is set in Ireland, and it is about a family, the story of a family, and it's narrated from a third-person perspective, and there are 5 narrators. So you get to hear the story from the perspective of these 5 characters, and it's a mother and 4 children. And one interesting aspect of this story is the fact that even though you would assume that when one of the characters is narrating their story, the next person would be saying something that happened in that same time frame, but it doesn't happen like that. So if one story happens in this year, so the next one will be in 10 years time.
So it jumps quite a bit.
Jumps the time, but I guess it will all make sense at the end.
Is it making sense now?
It's okay. I'm finding it.
It's a journey of discovery.
And so you should be on track. I feel that this should be read at one go, because there's a lot of information presented, and I like her style of writing. Because she describes everything. The landscape, Irish landscape is described so beautifully, and it's described a lot that I feel that the landscape itself is a character, and probably it is in a way, because it shapes the main character's attitude towards life, their experiences, etc. So the story, there are 2 parts for the story. One is leaving. Part 1 is leaving, and part 2 is coming home. So part 1 is when, it's about the past. So when they were all growing up or at some stage in their life, and coming home is when they all go back to their home, and it's Christmas time, and they all go to see their mother, who thinks that all the kids have abandoned her also.
Oh, wow.
And the mom is trying to sell the family home, and then probably all the 5 perspectives and what happened to them, it will all make sense, and then some conclusion might be reached. I don't know. I guess it's a good read. It's interesting, but just keep in mind the fact that there's so much of information, so you just have to read it at one stretch, otherwise you will forget what happened to this character.
Kind of lose the thread, because there are the 5 threads you might lose.
It's a story of the Madigan family. Sorry, I didn't say who it is about. And the children of Rosalind Madigan, and 1 boy and 3 girls.
Yeah, great.
So,
Are you enjoying it?
I'm enjoying it. And the Green Road, apparently it is a road. It's a road that's actually there in Ireland.
Okay. So if you've been to Ireland, you might recognise it and recognise where the book's set.
That's
always nice. I like reading books where I know I can picture that place, and I've been there before, and I can see that character or my imagination of that character walking down that street. It's really nice. Well, that's great. Thanks, Anu. How about you, Jess? What are you currently reading?
So I'm reading Toil and Trouble by Augustine Burroughs. I was actually drawn to this book because I read Running with Scissors, also a memoir by him. He's got a really engaging writing style, and I think that's what I'm drawn to most about him as a writer. He's had a really interesting childhood. So, bit of background about him. He lived with his mother for a period of his childhood, and then he was essentially sort of palmed off to his mother's psychiatrist, and there was a lot of sort of interesting happenings as he was growing up living with that family. So I was drawn to Toil and Trouble because he gives an account of himself being a witch, which I thought was a really interesting concept. At the moment, I'm really enjoying his writing style. He's a really good storyteller. He's very sort of outlandish, gives lots of really good details. But yeah, I almost feel that even though he is recounting things that have happened in his life, I feel like he's possibly also a bit of an unreliable narrator. So I don't know how much of it I'm sort of feeling is truthful and how much is embellished, but it's a really interesting read so far, and it's on audiobook, and it's read by him, and he's also got two other people that are also doing different voices, which I have found to be really engaging so far.
How's he doing? I sometimes find when books are read by the author, they're not always, they're sort of too close to the story, and they're not, especially if they're not like of a performing background, they kind of don't do it justice. Well, how's he doing? Because that's not his background.
Yeah, I read Running with Scissors as a physical book, but I also listened to it as an audiobook, and I do believe the audiobook is narrated by him as well. And he just, he's very larger than life when he reads. So it actually works quite well, and for this title, it works quite well for the subject matter as well.
Okay, yeah.
It does at the moment. I'm feeling like hopefully it'll sort of come together, but there's some details that he's given that feel a bit, I guess, tangent like at the moment. But I have a feeling he's setting up something to be drawn together later.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stick with it and see
where it takes you.
Interesting when the author reads it. Yeah.
Especially with the addition of having, so he's got another voice actor to play his mother, and it's really nice to hear that just difference in narration. So yeah,
it would have been awkward if he was trying to do his mum's voice.
I feel like him as an author, he would do it though.
Yeah, possibly.
First is tragedy, then is farce.
Yeah.
Quite.
Well, thanks for that, Jess. And Lachlan, what are you reading at the moment?
Right, well, Anita, what am I not reading? I think it's the easiest question to answer. So I've got quite a few things on the go at the moment. I'm one of those readers who just has a lot of books on the go. So in print at the moment, I am working my way through a biography of Shirley Jackson, an American horror writer of one of the great ghost stories, The Haunting of Hill House. This is a prize-winning biography of her by Ruth Franklin. Enjoying it, but I like some variety in my reading. So I'm also working my way through The Education of an Idealist by Samantha Power. Samantha Power was Barack Obama's appointee as US Ambassador to the United Nations. Cool. Very interesting read so far. But the thing that I'm really into right now is actually an audiobook, and it's on eAudio. So it is on our BorrowBox platform, which, there we go. So BorrowBox, available in the App Store, free to download, and yes, lots of ebooks and e-audio available from Wyndham City Libraries. So the thing that I'm enjoying at the moment is called Melmoth, which is a rather creepy book, actually, by Sarah Perry. And as the lights switch off and darkness encroaches, I think indeed that it's time for us to talk about some darker works. So basically, Melmoth is a book that mixes supernatural fiction and historical fiction. It's set in present-day Prague, and the protagonist is a woman named Helen Franklin, who's a British expat living in Prague with many dark secrets to keep, and she keeps very few friends, and she is drawn into this intrigue around a figure called Melmoth, or Melmotta, or Melmotka, the Witness. So look, I'm halfway through, and I don't want to give too many spoilers. I'm halfway through, but we've hit kind of a malaise. So the mystery is nicely poised at this point, but I don't care enough about any of the characters at this stage. So I'm wondering whether I'm going to finish it or not. Look, I probably will. I want to know what happens. But I can't find the protagonist is written in a very unsympathetic way, which I think has been done, to achieve a point. But anyway, so that's the thing that I'm enjoying at the moment. And I've also just started a book called Bone China by Laura Purcell, which is available in ebook on our BorrowBox platform, and that is set in the early Victorian era, and it again is about. It mixes historical and supernatural elements again.
I sense a theme now.
Sense a theme. As the weather warms up, my reading cools down, quite chilly. There are moments of visceral gore and horror at the start of Bone China, so I'm enjoying it already. Thank you. There we go. Yeah.
No, we might need to, because we had Kirsty and I recorded the horror podcasts, and this will also be available on podcast, as are our previous episodes of Live with Librarians. And we talked about the that supernatural sense that you get from horror fiction as opposed to the jump scares that you get from horror movies.
You can get jump scares in some horror fiction.
Can you? I've never had a jump scare.
It's got to be done really well.
I guess. I've been surprised by horror. I've been gasped. I've definitely gasped.
Yeah.
But never had that same jump squeal that I sometimes get in horror.
I've got some recommendations for you.
Okay.
Beware.
I know. Maybe. Yeah. That's great. So thanks for that, Lachlan, and for bringing the prop of BorrowBox, which is it does have a great range.
Reappear.
Oh, we can tell where Lachlan finds his reading. So that's great. Well, Anu, did you want to talk about something that you've read recently that you've enjoyed?
Yeah. So this is something I'm really passionate about because I really like this book. The book that I recently read is The Thing Around Your Neck. It is by Chimamanda Adichie. And this is a collection of 12 short stories. And it is all the stories have different themes. But there are some similar elements that run through all the stories. One is the fact that either the story takes place in Nigeria or in America. And another common factor is that out of the 12 short stories, 11 stories are told from the perspective of a Nigerian woman. And I feel like it deals with a lot of different themes, loneliness, then insecurities, then the after effects of the Nigerian civil war on the characters in the novel, then depression. There are lots of different topics that are handled here. And what struck me most was the way she writes. She makes storytelling to be a simple process. It's like an art, and I feel that because it's short stories, I didn't feel that you could get so deep into each character, but she does that with ease. And I feel, if I make an analogy, I feel that she after you read a couple of pages, she opens a small window and you can peer into the soul of each character. It's that beautiful. Not all the stories are that great, but some are really they stand out. And out of these, the ones that stand out for me is The Thing Around Your Neck. That is what the title is about. And it's about a Nigerian woman who goes to US in search of the American dream, and she doesn't realize her dream. She goes through a lot of hardships, and the thing around her neck actually symbolizes her her struggles, the feelings that she has for her motherland. She's neglecting, she doesn't have to maintain connections with her family, so the guilt, so she's not fitting in. So that's the discomfort I feel. In my interpretation, I feel it's a discomfort. That's the thing around her neck. And then finally she goes back to her place. And then there is another beautiful story about a Nigerian woman who was a poor woman who marries a rich man, and then he takes her to, he gives her everything. He looks after her family, and then he's a good husband, and they have children, and then he moves them to US, and then she it was a struggle for her to fit in first, but then she fits in. But then he becomes a visitor to their family, and he's a powerful man. But then she gets these insecurities, and she learns soon that he has got a mistress back in Nigeria. And so the way the author puts it out there is like, it's not explicit. So the feeling of betrayal that the woman feels, she just goes to the bathroom and chops off her hair. So and she finds herself, because she's indebted to this man, but still she finds herself. She understands that she has her own voice. So it's like, woman empowerment.
Like a real self-discovery.
Yeah, self-discovery. So it's all put beautifully, and it ends in a beautiful way as well. And then there was another story that's completely a different theme. That's about sibling rivalry. And that was like, it was shocking and disturbing to me.
Oh, wow.
It was just a very small story, but I never thought that, it was going to that level. I'm not going to say the story because it's very interesting. And how far somebody is going, it was ready to go because of the sibling rivalry. So that's like, it's portrayed very well.
Yeah.
And so...
It sounds great.
I think I've seen a TED talk by her called "The Danger of a Single Story."
Single story. Yeah,
yeah, she's a really good speaker.
Yeah,
as
she's
well.
a really good speaker. She
a
calls
brilliant
herself.
woman.
Yeah, she calls herself the happy feminist or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
She also wrote We Should All Be
Yeah, we
Feminists.
should all
We
be a
should be
feminist.
feminists,
Yeah.
It's a fabulous little book.
Yeah, very little. Yeah.
And
I
It's
think
an
I read it
award
on a
winner
lunch
as well.
break once. Like,
Yes.
she wrote the half of a Yellow Moon. That's the that became a big success. Yeah, so I recommend this to anyone who's.
I keep looking at your hands because the book is so little. Like,
Yeah,
it's not
it is
very
big.
big.
Yeah.
And like everything
It's
you've
easy
described, but like she's like so many different
many
things.
stories,
Yeah,
so
and
many
she
yeah.
gets straight
Yeah.
to the point. There's no dilly-dallying. It just gets straight to the point, but there is some depth as well. So that's what I like. And it's easy read. If you don't like one story, you can skip to the
Move
next
on.
story.
Short stories are good for that.
Yeah,
I
good.
used to read a lot of short stories, and I haven't in a while. And I
Yeah.
think you've inspired me to
Oh,
go
that's
back
good.
because you're right. They don't waste
Yeah.
time. You don't have time.
Yeah,
You don't have pages. You have
Yeah,
to
sometimes
get
you
all
may
of
not like your one story. You skip it. You just
Yeah.
read another one. Yeah.
less commitment.
Yeah.
It's perfect for summer reads.
Yeah,
one drink a story. Perfect.
Yeah. And this book is available in ebook as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, through our BorrowBox.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Fantastic
I like our
indeed.
BorrowBox.
Thanks, Anu. How about you, Jess? What have you read recently?
So, I listened to on audiobook Braving the Wilderness by Brené Brown. I listened to this at home while I was doing other things. I think one of the things I really like about audiobooks is you can still get really immersed in a story or a book, but you can also... It's just a different way of experiencing stories. And I was just doing some housework, and I just remember walking around the house going, whoa, yikes. Oh. So it's one of those books.
Was that related to the book? Or
Yes, yeah. No, it's not related to my cleaning. Yeah, it's related to the book. I loved this, and I also hated it. So
That's a common response to Brené Brown.
Yeah. And from what I've read of the criticism for this book and some of her other books, I actually agree with a good portion of the criticism for this book. So it's about standing alone and being radically vulnerable, and the idea of belonging and connecting with others despite differences. And there's a lot of really great themes there. And I feel like in this book, if she had just stuck to that and perhaps expanded it a bit more, it would have been more effective. But she brings in quite a lot of other ideas. And I think what was a little bit jarring for me was to introduce the idea of belonging. She talks about her own experience of not belonging, but she does it from the perspective of someone who is quite privileged, but she doesn't seem to acknowledge that privilege. So one of the things that sort of took me out of even just the first portion of it, as she describes the feeling of not belonging, because she has what she perceives as a black sounding name, and doesn't get invited to a lot of her white friends' birthday parties because of what she perceives as a black sounding name, and placing herself on the outside in a lot of different ways, but connecting them to things that I feel like it's a little bit tone deaf in places. Well, I say it's a lot tone deaf in places. I get the idea, and she's got really good ideas, but the way they're explored is just kind of misses it. So she talks about showing up for moments of collective joy and collective pain, and she also talks about things like connecting with others even though you disagree. She does talk about, obviously, you need to keep yourself physically safe if you're talking to someone who has very radically different ideas. And she does touch on minorities not being safe in some circumstances, but she does sort of give the idea that you should push through that in a way that I don't think takes into account emotional safety, and also perhaps that not being a good thing. Yeah, so
I think one of the main things with Brené Brown is that some of the ideas that Brené Brown puts forward are so powerful, and so useful, but a lot of her written work is very uncritical, and there's so obviously she's been very successful. Oprah Winfrey is a great champion. With Brené Brown's writing.
I've never read any books by
So
her.
things like Dare to Lead, ideas around leaning into discomfort. All of these come from Brené Brown.
So she's an American author?
Yes.
Yeah, so what drew me to this was that she talks a lot about researching and doing a lot of research into belonging and loneliness and vulnerability, and she also, one of the things that I saw is she was sort of saying, have the uncomfortable conversations, and that's what drew me, and a lot of the praise for the book drew me. And then I listened to it, and then I was like, oh, some of this isn't quite sitting right with me. I wouldn't say give it a miss, but let us know what you think if you read it. But some of it just was a bit, no.
Well, it sounds like she has valuable things to say, but you almost need to bring that critical perspective yourself and that awareness.
Well, I would have liked her to have added in minority voices to the conversation, especially when she was talking about things like race relations and stuff like that. I think placing yourself as a sort of middle-class, straight white woman, saying that you have experienced exclusion to the point of associating it with minority experiences. I don't know whether that's... I get what she's trying to say, it's just not landing.
Just sounds a bit...
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Hashtag opinions, please.
Yeah. Hashtag, yeah.
Indeed. Thanks, Lachlan. Yeah,
No
ready
worries.
to
Hi,
straight to
everybody.
Lachlan.
So
There you
things
go.
that I've just finished reading. So each year, I've got a go-to book that I try to reread each year. I don't always get to it.
Okay.
If I don't get to it, it's not a tragedy. I'll
Because
read
you
it again
know.
next year.
Read it twice the year
That's
after.
Yeah, to make up for it.
So this is something that I have reread this year, and I think this is about the 8th year I've reread this. Gaudy Night by Dorothy L. Sayers. So Dorothy L. Sayers was one of the in my opinion, one of the greatest of the golden age detective fiction writers, writing in English. So she began to write the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries in the mid-1920s. Gaudy Night is about number 8 or 9 in the series. Published in 1935, I think. I have made notes, yes. Written in 1935. And in my opinion, it's one of the best in the series. It is a beautifully written evocation of university life. So the central concept of the novel is, I'm just going to read it from the back because they pay people to write
Yeah,
these.
yeah.
So Harriet Vane has never dared to return to her old Oxford college. Now, despite her scandalous life, she has been summoned back. At first, she thinks her worst fears have been fulfilled as she encounters obscene graffiti, poisoned pen letters, and a disgusting effigy when she arrives at sedate Shrewsbury College for the Gaudy celebrations. But soon, Harriet realises that she is not the only target of this murderous malice, and she asks Lord Peter Wimsey to help. Great setup. And look, beautifully written. I love the prose. Written in 1935, so there are moments of casual racism and classism, which, in my view, are getting harder to sort of look through the more I read them. But each time I read it, I find more to appreciate in the book. So yes, Gaudy Night, just finished it for number 8, 8th time I think, and it was fantastic. Another thing that I've just finished, this isn't actually it, but I've just finished A Dark Adapted Eye by Barbara Vine. Barbara Vine is one of the pen names of Ruth Rendell, the late great crime writer. So this was first published in 1986. This is A Fatal Inversion, which is the second book written by Ruth Rendell as Barbara Vine. So A Dark Adapted Eye is a psychological thriller. So it was a departure for Ruth Rendell, stepping away from procedural crime. But it develops very rapidly themes around family misunderstandings and the side effects of keeping secrets and this kind of stuff. And it's really well written. For me, A Dark Adapted Eye is a great introduction to Ruth Rendell, even though it was published as a Barbara Vine book. Some people find Rendell a bit standoffish when you're trying to get into her. But Dark Adapted Eye is a great way just to start in that particular oeuvre. So yes, I enjoyed it immensely.
I'm curious, I just want to ask with the Dorothy L. Sayers.
Yes.
Why that one in particular over her others?
Oh, for me,
like, or like, do they need to be read in an order, or could you just?
Actually, that's a really good question.
Yeah, like I'm curious.
Gaudy Night. So it is written as a Lord Peter Wimsey mystery, but the protagonist is Harriet Vane, and Harriet Vane is essentially Dorothy L. Sayers. So probably overstating it or oversimplifying it, but Harriet Vane is written as a beautifully sympathetic character. Her development throughout the book is extraordinary, and really Gaudy Night is her story. So, and the craftsmanship that Sayers shows in this book is really fantastic. So I recommend it just as a piece of wonderful English language writing.
So like standalone. So you don't need to have.
No, look, there are references to what has happened, and that's sort of a necessary precondition to the relationship between Harriet Vane and Lord Peter Wimsey. But the work stands in its own, on its own feet, really.
Yeah.
So.
That's good, because it can be a bit intimidating with those writers that have written
Yes.
big, long series.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is part of a series.
It is. It's I think it's number 8 actually in a 13-book series.
Okay.
So.
8th book,
good that
you've read
it's
it 8 times.
Oh, there you go.
8 to 64. And I don't know where to go with
mystery.
that.
No, me neither. It just sort of struck my mind though. Thanks, no, because I've always seen Dorothy L. Sayers, but never quite known where to start.
Yeah, I also haven't read her.
Yeah, and if you'd like, so it's not a classic detective story by Sayers. So Have His Carcass and The Nine Tailors are actually 2 fabulous detective stories by Dorothy L. Sayers in the library collection as well. So I really recommend people give it a go. She has had a bit of a resurgence. I don't know if she's ever been out of print, but they've recently been republished.
Yeah, those editions there.
Those new deco sort of stuff.
Yes, they look really nice.
yeah,
a lot more
they are.
attractive, probably increase
absolutely.
them flying off the shelves.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Lachlan. And I know you're looking forward to some of these here. Do you want to tell us about what you're looking forward to?
Yeah, definitely. Like Lachlan and like many others here, I also read at a time 2-3 books.
Yes.
So I'm planning to hear this memoir by Olivia Newton-John, Don't Stop Believing. I'm like, and it's read by the author. I always like memoirs read by the authors. In the previous Live with the Librarians, I mentioned that I was going to read Michelle Obama's Becoming, and I read it. I heard it basically, and it was a beautiful experience because she is the narrator. So I feel that with this book also I will get such a similar experience because she is the narrator, and I'm I'm curious to know more about this powerful, kind, and courageous woman. Yeah, iconic star.
She is,
Yeah. So that's one book I'm looking forward to listening to, and this is one book I'm planning to read. This is called I Am Changed by Susie Gale. So I don't know much about the book, but from what I saw, I read the blurb and what is written here. It kind of attracted me to it. This is also kind of a feminist book. I don't know why I chose. Yeah, it's a YA book as well. So it's a popular book.
It does have a good cover.
Yeah. So the topic, the title itself, I Am Changed. That itself speaks volumes about the book.
Yeah.
I'll read something that's written here that will give you an idea of what it is about. It's about Ugandan women, and I think the author went and talked to many women, and from their experiences, she formulated this story. Yeah. So the first, what's here is that they told her that her body belonged to men and her mind didn't matter. They were wrong. So it's about a strong woman who comes forward because education was denied to the women there, and she fights her way forward and attains probably what she wants. So I like to read about such
it sounds
strong
powerful.
characters.
Sounds really powerful.
So these are the two books that I'm looking forward to reading.
Great. Thanks, Anu. About you, Jess, what are you looking forward to reading?
So, Anu was talking before about short stories and things like that. I'm going to try for a shorter piece of fiction. So I'm going to read a novella called Every Heart a Doorway. And it's by Seanan McGuire. I don't know whether that's how you say it.
Yep.
So I was drawn to it because I spoke in a previous Live with the Librarians that I do quite like fairy tale retellings and different perspectives on a lot of older myth and fairy tales. So that's what drew me to it. But also I'm feeling a lot of Ransom Riggs sort of vibes from it. So essentially it's about a place where all of these children are and they're sort of slowly disappearing, and from the impression that I get, there are some narratives of traditional storytales / traditional
that's interesting.
Like a different take on some.
So it's not happening in the current present time?
No, apparently it is. Yeah. From what I've seen, it is. So I'm interested in how that can be explored in like a novella, because that to me is quite a short sort of medium to explore what looks to be a bigger idea, but it also looks a bit fun as well. So
I think
if you don't like it, there's not much.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
no commitment.
The
short story. No commitment. High return.
Yeah.
If it's a good one.
Yeah, it's harder to write short stories, I believe.
Well, that's why a lot of the short stories that we've talked about previously impress me, because it is quite a hard medium to really do something powerful. And the people that do something powerful or do it well, I think good writing should look effortless, but on closer inspection you see like rereading things. All the hard work that goes into it. Also this one I will be reading on audiobook as well. Just something nice to sort of throw on in the car when I'm driving or something like that. So
Sounds great. Thanks, Jess. What are you looking forward to, Lachlan?
Well, my TBR pile is growing by the day, but I am looking forward to something on e-audio. So I have just downloaded it actually, and it's called Ghostland by Edward Parnell. It is non-fiction, so it's not fiction. And it was just really the blurb that got me. So Edward Parnell found himself trapped in the recurring nightmare of a family tragedy. For comfort, he turned to his bookshelves, back to the ghost stories that obsessed him as a boy, and to the writers through the ages who have attempted to confront what comes after death. In Ghostland, Parnell goes in search of those sequestered places of the British Isles, lonely moors, moss-covered cemeteries, stark shores and folkloric woodlands. He explores how these landscapes conjured and shaped a kaleidoscopic spectrum of literature and cinema. So it's kind of a meta.
Yeah, I was-
bit of so try and give some of my other reading a bit of context.
So you're into horror and
Not usually, no.
I'm getting a poor, like a bad impression of Lachlan's reading today. We're just caught him in
no,
a
it's a wide
hurry.
range of
Okay.
reading,
No,
but
no,
probably
you've-
the summer reads.
Yeah, you've got me on a bad week. But that's something that I am actually looking forward to. Once I've finished Melmoth, once I've knocked Melmoth off in the car, I'll be starting Ghostland by Edward Parnell. Again, available on your
Audiobook
Borrow
seems to be the thing.
I know it might look kind of funny, but it's like BorrowBox is great, and it just like you can
It's
see
very
a lot
convenient.
of us read and listen, and it just to me
and
it's just
print
a way.
and ebook
Yeah.
and
And there are ways to like increase our reading capacity. That's
Yeah.
how I see it.
Absolutely.
It's like
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
read more. How can I do this?
And you download it, and you don't have to be in a place where you need Wi-Fi because it'll be on your
That's
phone.
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
you
it's so
You
convenient.
can do sort of other things. I think a lot of people, one of the barriers for reading is that whole I've got to sit there, I've got to have a quiet
Yeah.
environment,
Yes.
I've got to have time. Whereas what I like about especially audiobooks is I can get my housework
Yeah,
done,
that's true.
can get my cooking done,
And go for
can
a
have
walk.
it.
I
Yeah.
can listen in the car,
Yeah,
on
in
the
the
way to
car,
work,
yeah.
the commute.
Yep.
Yeah, make use of that time.
And we've mentioned BorrowBox a few times, but
Yes.
of course it's not the only platform
Yeah,
that Windy
true.
City Library has. We
Yeah.
also offer RB Digital, which has
Yeah.
got a fantastic selection of ebooks, e-audio and e-magazines, and Access 360, which has also got a great selection of ebooks and a few e-audio available for you too, all free as well.
Your library card, that's right.
With
and
your
I've
library
just
membership.
queued up because I've just finished an audiobook in the car on the way to work here, so I had to queue one up ready to go home on RB Digital called The Weekend by Charlotte Wood,
Oh, yes.
who won the Stella Prize with her last book called The Natural Way of Things, which was very good. Weird, but good. Have you read it? Has anyone read it?
No.
No, weird
heard
but
about
good. Yeah, and I have heard very good things about The Weekend, so I'm really looking forward to listening to that on the way
great.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I also read while I'm driving.
yes.
Yeah.
No,
At
no, you
least-
listen while you're driving. You don't read while you're driving.
Sorry, I
No,
listen. That's correction.
It's yeah.
Yes.
You're
The-
noticing a theme here,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
Unsafe
yeah.
driving. No, sorry, lack of time.
Yeah, listening. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I finished
Enjoying. Exactly. Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing your summer reads and what you're currently reading and loving now. All those titles, we'll have them in a list available on our website with links to the library catalogue and probably to our e-platforms as well, since we've talked about them so much tonight. So if they're available on e, we'll make a note of that as well. And thanks for joining us. Hope you have a good evening and talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.